How does the highly regarded formula affect your view on what trades should happen?
I don't think it does too much. I think that the highly regarded formula is very like epic oriented. Like it's comparing people across time and eras and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like I said with Jimmy Butler, he's performing well, and we could see that. So it's like, well, who else? And then you start saying, well, why does he perform well? Maybe because he fits with what the Warriors do. So it's like, and it gets a little subjective there.
So don't look at the highly regarded formula and pick the top player and say that's the most valuable.
No, because it's like for instance, like first of all, we have to see but what you end up doing, you start looking at things more objective when you look at the highly regarded stuff. And I've been saying for years, Giannis needs to leave. And if it wasn't for, I was saying that, for instance, Austin Reaves and D'Angelo Russell cannibalized each other. They were a very similar archetype. And my friends will be the first to admit, hey, you said D'Angelo would be better than Austin Reaves. I did. However, they traded one, and all of a sudden one blows up. So it's like those cannibalizations, like Kuminga and Butler are cannibalizing each other. Let Kuminga go. Free Kuminga. Let him go to his bad team and perform.
Okay, go back a little bit. Why does Giannis need to leave? What is it? The same situation, cannibalization?
No, I think that Giannis is doing so much for his team, and it is eliciting worse and worse return collectively over time, and mostly because the team is aging. They got rid of Brook Lopez. I think they should have gotten rid of Bobby Portis. He can barely run, but it's like Giannis needs a team where he doesn't need to score 33, 10, and 8. He doesn't need.
I guess LeBron made it look easy carrying a team to the finals a bunch of times, but maybe it's just not that easy.
Giannis did it once as well, and Luka did it once. But guess what? Luka's putting up them numbers. LeBron has put up those numbers. Giannis has put up those numbers. It doesn't necessarily turn into a championship. It turns into an all-time great season that will be counted in the highly regarded formula for historic seasons. But it's like if people are saying, I got to win, I want to win a championship. Look, he's already all-time great. Now for the rest, he's 31 years old, probably play until he's 38, 39. What can he do with the time he has left? He's not going to do much with a team that's basically without him is on the verge of a rebuild. And we're talking, when LeBron left Cleveland, they went from the best team, the worst team in the Eastern Conference. You'll probably see something similar from Milwaukee for a time. That's the circle of life,
It seems like the best of the best, and this is just kind of going back to rankings in general. Players you just named, LeBron, Giannis, Luka, players who seem to by themselves be able to take a team to the finals,
Almost single-handedly.
There's pieces, obviously, and it might be a bunch of role players, but it seems like that they are the driving force. Are all of those players kind of in your top 10, top 15? Like, where do they rank, or what happens when they do such a good thing?
So, like for instance, Luka is in my top 100, but barely, and mostly because he's young. So he's doing all-time great things, but doesn't have a body of work. So over time, he's going to start skipping steps. I mean, when you have a good season. Jokic's seasons in my rankings, I started this ranking system in 23. Every year he's skipping like 8 to 12 spots. But that's diminishing returns over time because you start getting closer and closer to the greatest. And it's like it's harder to pass. Like you're going to pass Adrian Dantley and let's just say Ben Wallace and Scottie Pippen quickly. But then when you start getting, okay, well, are you going to pass Curry? Are you going to pass Kobe? Are you going to pass Bill Russell? You may slow down a bit. And now in my rankings, I think I have Jokic at 18 or something. So now next season, well, he's hurt a lot this season, but guess what? He may only skip one step or maybe two. He's still doing great. But you got Luka, who's going to skip a lot because he's like ranked 90th or something. And you have Giannis, who's in the 30 range. This year he's hurt a lot. He's probably not going to do much. But those guys, as long as they're the key feature, like they're going to do a lot for their legacy score on my system.
LeBron is a player, I think he's in his 21st or 22nd season.
23rd.
There you go. And then you have people like Kevin Durant who are, in their late 30s, have a body of work. Where are they ranking on the list right now? Because they're the ones who, it sounds like they might be somewhere in the I don't know, top 25 based on things that you're saying, and probably those ones that are hard to pass.
The thing with LeBron is that, like, I think that he's number 2 right now. If you were to go look at the Highly Regarded channel,
Number 2 all time.
number 2 all time.
Okay.
However, like, I've been reconsidering my list, and just to loop in Kevin Durant, I think I have him at number 10 or 9, something like that.
Okay.
But I've been re-looking at a small component of the formula, and the small component is basically the threshold of where the historic greatness lies. And I've explained this to you before. I've explained it on other videos. Like, the historic greatness is basically taking a whole season, regular season, playoffs, and saying, okay, what did you do in that whole season, and from a win share perspective, and did you cross a certain threshold to be counted in that historic column? And so,
kind of like making the cut on
that's
the PGA.
right. Yeah. And every year it resets, and you say, can you make the cut again? Can you make a cut again? You count those number of times you made the cut. So right now the cut is 13.75. Is it arbitrary? Yeah, but all statistics are arbitrary. But when you put the catches, you're putting everyone in the same arbitrary system to make it an actual objective formulaic approach to comparing players.
Okay, 13.75 what?
13.75 win share points collect total in regular season and playoffs.
Okay.
However, I'm reconsidering, do I really want to have that limit at 13.75? So I tested it out with 13, and certain players that weren't in the top 100, that honestly I'm surprised, like, man, they should have been there, actually got their due justification, in my opinion. So, for instance, George Gervin, who wasn't in my top 100, when you just lower it to 13, that means in the course of any one regular season playoffs, they get total 13 win shares. George Gervin is now in the list, and he gets as low as 58. When I see that type of injection just by moving the meter a little bit, that's when I know, like, okay, maybe there's a way for you to massage or alter the metric for the greater good. I guess I hate using that term.
It just sounds like you have your own reserves list, so to speak.
Yeah, Blake Griffin, for instance. I have Deandre Jordan ranked 83, and I don't have Blake Griffin in it. DeAndre Jordan had great peak seasons. For 3 years, he was all defensive team and all NBA for like first team on both of them for like 3 seasons. That's important. Again, I don't count those, but when you look at why the writers gave him those points, you realize, wow, his field goal percentage, his rebound, his blocks, all that stuff. He was an all-star, so he was putting up all these numbers, and it was justified. However, when you lower it to 13, Blake Griffin may not have had those peaks that DeAndre had, but his whole body of work was actually slightly better, and it actually it's the way the formula works, it actually puts Blake Griffin in like 90-something, but it takes DeAndre Jordan out completely. And so when people, I mean, again, all these formulas is, do they pass the sniff test? Who's the best? In my system is LeBron, Jordan, Kareem, Magic, Wilt, not in necessarily that order.
I was going to say, because you said LeBron was number 2, right?
Yeah, and we'll get to that one because this also affects those two guys. But it's like, it passes the sniff test. Blake Griffin in the top 100 all time, it generally passes the sniff test. Now, here's the catch. When I drop it to 13, it actually moves LeBron ahead of Jordan in terms of all-time greatness. So in 22, he was greater, but because of his late career inefficiencies, he actually lost that title because of, I guess, dominance. His normalized win shares over 48 got so weak that Jordan ended up passing him passively. But however, if you drop the historic requirement to 13 instead of 13.75, which is very, very small, and leapfrogs Jordan if you slightly change the formula. For me, I don't care. And most people say, that means you like, I don't care. I just want to have a system where everyone can be judged in an objective, in a rational, in a decent way, and we don't miss things.
I mean, it's interesting because I think most of the time you just hear a debate, who's better, who's worse. You don't necessarily hear about, a chart over time and, eclipsing Jordan and then going below Jordan again. And so it does sound like there's at least some fairness to it. It's clearly not picking favorites.
Most people think that you shouldn't be judged for playing bad. Like, well, what if you scored 30, and again, hypothetical, but what if you scored 30 points a game for 5 years of your career and no one can touch you? Let's just say 30, 10, and 5. 30 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists. And then the rest of your career, by the way, you didn't get hurt. You didn't get, nothing really happened. You just fell apart. You're a grand story that they'll make 30 for 30, and all of a sudden you went from doing that to now you're only averaging 10, 3, and 3. And it's like, what happened? What happened to him? But guess what? How do you rank him? Because he had the best seasons ever, except for maybe because he has Kareem level seasons. Do you put him at the level of Kareem? No, you don't, because there's something about people are addressing you didn't do everything you needed to do. So therefore, you take that from a granular or a gradual standpoint. Well, LeBron, you had a time when you weren't great. He's in that situation right now. And so how does that compare to someone who was always great? And you can't deny that. You could say the same thing with people like Chris Mullin. You could say the same thing about that with Kyrie Irving, where it's like they were good.
Have you ever heard the phrase term, Jordan burned the brightest? He had the brightest candle.
I would say that's dominance.
The longest lasting candle that burned.
That would be cumulative. We talk about those, yeah. And those are all. That's the cumulative. That's the LeBron, Kareem, great dominance. That's the Jokic. That's the Jordan. That's the George Mikan. And then LeBron, Kareem, Kobe. They had all the 20-year careers. They were relatively good those whole times. But guess what? Bird, 12 years. Is he trash? No, but guess what? If you have a guy that you can compare the same thing, what if a guy scored 30 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists for 12 years? And then let's just say he played 20 years, but the rest of them, he just rode the bench. That's Larry Bird. It's just that he didn't ride the bench. He just walked away from the game. So it's like we give him the normalization award. While he was playing, he was better than anyone, but he just didn't have the long body of work. That's the problem with Jordan. And that's not necessarily, despite his short career, he's still at least the second best ever.
Makes sense to me, at least conceptually. Obviously, there's so many different formulas. So
I'm just asking people to pick one, and don't say Russell is great because he has 11 rings, and then say LeBron is great because he played 23 seasons, and then Kareem is great because he had 6 MVPs. Compare people all across the board in the same way and see what answer you get. But people are scared to do that because it takes away from the controlling narrative of people who control narratives for a living.
So let's go back a little bit because we hit on the NBA Cup when we were talking about my shirt given to me from a mutual friend of ours. But we didn't necessarily talk about its worth or what it could be. Because right now it feels a little bit arbitrary. People, they lose and they don't care. Or they win and they move on. How do you turn something that is not valued into something, I guess, valuable? How does that relate to the highly regarded formula?
The highly regarded formula is about objectivity. And it's about rewarding performance, and it's about punishing lack of performance. The NBA Cup, if you want to make it important, you reward performance. Look, and you punish lack of performance. What makes playoffs important in all sports is that there's scarcity and that there's punishment for lack of performance. What's the punishment? If you lose, you go home and you don't play until the next season, and everything, coaches get fired, players move teams, contracts end. But if you perform, championships, commercials, I'm going to Disneyland. So it's like the NBA Cup, if you lose, you just go on to play the next game, not in the NBA Cup because it's a regular season game. So it loses all its penalty. You wrap it. It's essentially a championship wrapper without the candy inside. It's like, it looks like a bag of candy, but it's empty. So you have to make it impactful.